My brother locked me out of our dead father's house, but what I discovered hidden in the basement was a secret so dark it made our inheritance feud look like a childish squabble. A secret that began with a single weathered key taped to the back of a forgotten family portrait. The call about Dad's passing came on a Tuesday morning, the rain sheeting against my office window in a grim, pathetic fallacy. It was a massive coronary, the doctor said. Quick, probably painless. Arthur Miller, a man of quiet routines and meticulous habits, had his final exit scripted with brutal efficiency. The grief was a physical blow, a hollowing out that left me numb for days. The will reading, held a week later in the oak-paneled office of my father's longtime lawyer, Mr. Yates, was as straightforward as the man himself. The estate, the 3-bedroom clapboard house in our sleepy hometown, his savings, his prized 1967 Ford Mustang, and all his worldly possessions, was to be divided equally between his 2 children, me, Sarah, and my older brother, John. I remember the tight, almost imperceptible twitch in John's jaw as Yates read the clause. I mistook it for grief. I was wrong. John, who had never quite managed to launch, had been living with Dad for the better part of a decade. The official story was that he was there as a caretaker helping Dad with the upkeep of the old place. The unofficial truth, which everyone in the family politely ignored, was that a series of failed ventures and a stubborn refusal to adhere to anyone else's schedule had left John perpetually adrift. Dad's house was his anchor, and now, with Dad gone, it was his lifeline. I, on the other hand, had built a life 3 hours away. A demanding career in graphic design, a husband named Mark who was my rock, and 2 beautiful, chaotic children who filled our home with noise and love. The distance between my present and my past felt more significant than the mere drive time. The first fissure appeared at the funeral reception, held in the house's stuffy, floral wallpapered living room. Amidst plates of cold cuts and sympathetic murmurs, I tried to broach the subject of the estate with John. "We don't need to talk about this now, Sarah," he'd said, his voice low and strained, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "Let's just get through today." I agreed, attributing his reticence to the raw pain of the moment. But the weeks that followed were a masterclass in evasion. My phone calls went unanswered for days, then returned with breezy, dismissive replies. "The probate lawyer is swamped, it's a small town, you know how it is." When I suggested a weekend where Mark and I could drive down to start the painful but necessary process of sorting through Dad's belongings, his tone would turn frosty. "It's not a good time. The place is a mess. I'm still getting things organized. I'm not ready for you to start carting off half the house." The phrase "carting off" stung. This wasn't about looting. It was about legacy. My anxiety grew with each passing week. There were specific, irreplaceable things in that house. The heavy leather-bound family photo albums that documented our childhoods. My mother's wooden recipe box, the index cards stained with drops of gravy and chocolate, her elegant cursive detailing how to make my favorite stew. And most of all, the antique writing desk that had been in her family for generations. A beautiful mahogany piece with intricate inlay. Dad had promised it to me on my wedding day, squeezing my hand and whispering, "Your mother would have wanted you to have it." These items held no significant monetary value, but to me they were priceless. A casual comment from a well-meaning cousin finally shattered my illusion of patience. "Saw John the other day," she mentioned over the phone. "He had a for sale sign leaning against the garage. Guess you guys are moving quick, huh?" I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. The sign had appeared and vanished within a week, she said. John had never mentioned putting the house on the market. The final straw was a phone call that escalated into our first real argument. I had finally managed to pin him down on a Tuesday evening. "John, this can't wait any longer. I'm coming down this Saturday. We need to go through Dad's things together." There was a long silence on the other end. "No," he said flatly. "It's not a good time." "I don't care if it's a good time." I snapped, my composure breaking. "It's my house too, John. According to Dad's will, we own it equally." His voice dropped, losing any pretense of civility. I live here, Sarah. This is my home. You have your own life, your perfect little family in the city. You can't just waltz in here and start making demands. I'll box up your things and send them to you when I get around to it. The line went dead. He'd hung up on me. I stood in my modern kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life I'd built, and felt a profound sense of injustice. This was no longer about grief. This was about possession. The decision felt drastic but necessary. I told Mark everything, my voice shaking with anger and guilt. He, ever the pragmatist, supported me. He's left you with no choice, Sarah. You have a legal right to be there. I took a personal day from work, made the 3-hour drive under a leaden sky, and hired a locksmith to meet me at the house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled into the familiar driveway. The house looked different somehow, closed off and hostile. John's beat-up truck was nowhere to be seen. A small mercy. The locksmith, a burly man with kind eyes, did his job efficiently. The click of the new lock sliding into place felt like a point of no return. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, not the familiar scent of lemon polish and old books, but the stale odor of takeout and unwashed laundry. The living room was a study in erasure. Dad's comfortable, worn-out armchair was gone. The bookshelves, once crammed with his history books and detective novels, were half empty. A cold, sleek sofa stood where our old floral one had been. A wave of nausea passed over me. I rushed to the corner of the room where my mother's writing desk had stood for my entire life. It was gone. A white-hot fury replaced the nausea. I fumbled for my phone and called John. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him, my fingers trembling on the screen. I'm in the house. Where is Mom's desk? I waited. 1 minute. 5, 10. The silence from my phone was deafening. Trying to steady my breathing, I decided to conduct a quick, frantic inventory. The hall closet where the photo albums were kept. Empty. The kitchen counter where the recipe box always sat. Clear. It was a systematic cleansing. He hadn't just been living there. He'd been curating the past, removing any evidence of my claim, of my memories. With nowhere else to turn, I headed down to the basement. It was the one part of the house John had always loathed, a damp, concrete-floored realm of shadows and spiders, filled with the detritus of 50 years. If he wanted to hide things, this is where they would be. The single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, but there were clear paths, signs of recent activity. And then I saw it, shoved behind a rolled-up carpet and a stack of old National Geographic magazines. The mahogany writing desk. Relief so potent it made my knees weak washed over me. He hadn't sold it. He'd just hidden it away like a shameful secret. I dragged it out into the dim light, running my hands over its smooth surface, checking for damage. It seemed intact. As I traced the familiar patterns of the wood, my fingers brushed against a slight irregularity on the underside of the desktop, a seam so fine it was nearly invisible. I'd spent hours at this desk as a child doing my homework and I had never noticed it. Pressing along the seam, I felt a tiny, almost imperceptible give. I pushed harder. There was a soft, precise click. A small, thin drawer, no larger than a box of index cards, slid silently open from the side of the desk. My breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, wasn't a child's hidden treasure or a stack of old letters. It was a single, tarnished key. And tucked beside it was a thick, sealed manila envelope. My name was written on the front in my father's unmistakable, precise handwriting. A cold dread, entirely separate from the basement's chill, seeped into my bones. This was deliberate. This was planned. Why would Dad hide a key in a letter for me? Why the secrecy? With trembling hands, I sat on the dusty floor, my back against the cold concrete wall, and tore open the envelope. The letter was several pages long, dated just 2 months before his fatal diagnosis. The words that leapt out at me made the world lurch. My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and you have found the desk. I am so sorry for the burden I am placing upon you, but what I am about to reveal could not be risked falling into the wrong hands. John cannot know. Ever. The man you have known as your brother is not my biological son. I had to read the sentence over and over, the words blurring as tears welled in my eyes. It was impossible. Your mother, my beloved Eleanor, had a brief but intense affair the summer before we were married. It was a moment of weakness, of fear, I think. We were young and the future was terrifying. She confessed everything to me when she discovered she was pregnant. She was devastated, convinced I would leave her. But I loved her more than life itself, Sarah. I made a choice. I would raise that child as my own. I gave him my name. I have never for a single second regretted that decision. I loved John with all my heart as my firstborn son. But the truth, it seems, is a ghost that never rests. The letter went on to explain that a few years ago John, while searching for old insurance paperwork in the attic, had stumbled upon a small locked metal box that had belonged to our mother. Driven by curiosity or perhaps a deeper intuition, he had forced it open. Inside he found his original birth certificate, which listed father, unknown, and a faded photograph of our mother with a handsome dark-haired stranger. There was also a letter from the man, a musician named Michael, pleading with Eleanor to leave my father and be with him. This discovery poisoned him, Dad wrote. He confronted me. It was the most painful conversation of my life. He was furious, accusing me of living a lie, of stealing his true identity. The sweet, if sometimes lost, boy I raised vanished, replaced by a bitter, resentful man. He became obsessed with money, with the will. He started making comments about what was rightfully his, about how he had devoted his life to this family and this house while you had abandoned us. I believe he feels that because he is not of my blood, he is not truly a part of this family and that his inheritance is therefore in jeopardy. He is wrong, but reason has left him. Then came the second, even more staggering revelation. The will that was read to you and John is a decoy, a document drawn up by a lawyer who has since retired and knew nothing of the true situation. It was a necessary deception, Sarah. I feared that if John knew the true terms of my estate while I was alive, he would have contested it, dragged us through a vicious legal battle, and destroyed what little remained of our family. I could not bear to see that happen. I needed to protect you and in a strange way to protect him from himself. The key enclosed here is for a safety deposit box at the First National Bank on Main Street. The box is in your name only. Inside you will find my true legally executed last will and testament, prepared by Mr. Yates, who is the only other person who knows the full truth. In this will I have left the house and the majority of my estate to you. For John I have established a generous trust fund, enough to provide for him comfortably, but the house, your mother's and my home, is yours. It is what she would have wanted. The code word to access the box is echo, your mother's favorite word from her poetry books. Be careful, Sarah. I fear what John might be capable of if he feels cornered. He is not the brother you grew up with. Trust no one but Mr. Yates. I love you more than you can ever know. Be strong, my darling girl. Dad. I sat in the profound silence of the basement, the letter clutched in my hands. The hum of the freezer and the faint dripping of a leaky faucet were the only sounds. The entire foundation of my life had been ripped away. John wasn't just being difficult. He was a man operating from a place of profound betrayal and existential panic. His possessiveness over the house wasn't mere greed. It was a desperate last-ditch effort to claim the legitimacy he felt his bloodline denied him. His hostility towards me wasn't simple sibling rivalry. It was the fury of an imposter fighting for a place that was never truly his. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through my shock. John could return at any moment. I carefully folded the letter, placed it and the key back into the envelope and tucked it securely inside my jacket. I had to get to Mr. Yates immediately. I drove to his law office in the town center, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The familiar streets seemed menacing, every pedestrian a potential spy for John. Did he know about the real will? Was that the real reason he was so desperate to keep me out? To sell the house quickly under the guise of the decoy will, and disappear with the proceeds before I could uncover the truth? Mr. Yates, a man in his 70s with a kind, weary face, listened to my rushed, tearful story. When I showed him the letter and whispered the code word echo, his shoulders slumped as if carrying a great weight. "Your father was a good man, Sarah," he said softly. "He was trapped in an impossible situation. He loved you both so much, but he spent his final months in a state of constant fear. He confirmed everything. The safety deposit box was real. The new will was real. We went to the bank together. The process felt surreal, like something from a thriller movie. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Inside the long metal box lay a single formidable-looking document, the last will and testament of Arthur Miller. It was dated recently, and its terms were exactly as my father had described. The house was mine. Armed with this nuclear truth, I felt a surge of power, but it was immediately tempered by a crushing sense of dread. The confrontation was now inevitable, and it would be catastrophic. Mr. Yates's advice was stern. "File this with the probate court first thing in the morning. I will have John formally served. Do not go back to that house tonight, Sarah. Stay somewhere he cannot find you. A hotel. Do not underestimate his reaction." I took a room at a generic chain hotel on the highway, the floral patterns and bland art a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. That evening my phone erupted into a continuous vibrating frenzy. "What did you do? What did you steal from the house?" "Yates just called me." "This is a lie. A forgery. You always were his favorite. You think you can steal my birthright? Answer me, Sarah." Then the final text, a message so venomous it made me physically recoil. "You're just like your mother. A lying, cheating whore. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." He knew. He knew everything. And the brother I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger consumed by hatred. The legal battle was swift and brutal. John contested the will, hiring a slick, aggressive lawyer from the city who accused me of undue influence, of preying on a sick old man. He claimed the letter was a forgery, a desperate ploy by the favored daughter to steal everything. But Mr. Yates was an impeccable witness. My father's meticulousness worked in our favor. He had kept a diary documenting John's increasingly hostile behavior and his own fears, which was entered as evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who had seen every kind of family tragedy, saw through John's claims. The true will was upheld. The house was mine. But as I stood on the porch after the verdict, the keys cold in my hand, it felt like a hollow victory. I had won a house but lost a brother. The court gave John 30 days to vacate. On the appointed day I arrived with a sheriff's deputy, my stomach a tight knot of anxiety. The front door was locked. Using my key I pushed it open. The scene inside was one of pure, unadulterated spite. The walls were gouged with what looked like a crowbar. The new carpets were slashed and stained with what I hoped was red wine. But the worst was in my old bedroom. In angry black spray paint, scrawled across the wall where my childhood bed had been, were the words, "Lying whore's daughter." Next to it an arrow pointed to a crude drawing of a grave. The air smelled of rage and destruction. I walked through the wreckage in a state of numb horror. This was more than anger. It was a ritualistic desecration. As I stumbled into the backyard, seeking air, I noticed a patch of disturbed earth near the base of the giant oak tree where we had once had a tire swing. The grass was torn up, the dirt freshly turned. A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. What had he buried? I pointed it out to the deputy. With a grim expression, he found a shovel in the garage, which had been left surprisingly untouched. He started to dig. It didn't take long. About 2 feet down, the blade hit metal. It was my father's old fireproof lockbox, the one he'd used before getting the safety deposit box. It had been pried open, its contents long gone. except for one thing. Taped to the inside of the bent lid was a single faded photograph. It was my mother, Eleanor, young and radiant, laughing with her head thrown back. Her arm was linked with that of the handsome dark-haired stranger from Dad's letter. Michael. On the back, in my mother's flowing script, was an inscription that sealed our family's tragic fate. Michael, summer of '85. My greatest mistake, my only solace. John hadn't just destroyed the house. He had performed a funeral for his own history. He had buried the evidence of his origin, the photograph that had shattered his world, in a final symbolic act of severance. He was erasing himself from a family he now believed had never been his to begin with. I never saw or heard from John again. He vanished, leaving no forwarding address. The house stood as a ruined monument to our broken family. I spent months and a significant portion of the estate's value repairing the physical damage. Replastering walls, replacing carpets, painting over the hatred. But I could never repair the atmosphere. The house was haunted not by ghosts, but by the living memory of what had happened. I put it on the market 6 months later. It sold quickly to a young family who knew nothing of its history. I hoped they could fill it with happier sounds. Sometimes in my quiet moments I take out my father's letter. I wonder if his plan, born of love and a desperate desire for peace, was the right one. Would the truth, delivered openly years ago, have been a kinder poison? Or would it have destroyed us all sooner? I'll never know. All I have left is the profit from a house I never wanted to own, the ghost of a brother I loved and lost twice, and a secret that was never mine to keep, hidden in a desk drawer, waiting in the dark to be found.